So the John Wick story is known for its incredible action and the great acting, the cinematography, but one of the aspects that is almost always overlooked is the unbelievable insight, the keen insight it has into the nature of the human experience, the nature of vice, the consequences of our actions, and that's what we're going to dive into today, the philosophy behind John Wick. This is Unsafe Media. My name is Ryan Martin, and I help you respond with wisdom and with virtue to the ideas that shape our age. Now, this is a heavy spoiler alert. I'm assuming you actually already know these events. If you haven't watched it, definitely don't close out of this video. That kills my click-through rate. Rather, just put it on mute, put it on 2x speed, let it play through 20, 30, 50 times in the background, all right? That would really help me out. I've read some commentaries and some reviews where people say that John Wick is kind of relatable because he's forced into it, right? We're rooting for him because he has no other choice, and that simply is not true. Now, I don't know the hearts and the minds of the writers of this movie, but I'll tell you that is certainly not the moral of these stories. Rather, these stories are about the idea of consequences, the consequences of our actions when we choose what is wrong over what is right. And largely, there's a reality that choosing the right thing could very well lead to your death, that doing the right thing is frequently unsafe, and yet that is the correct course of action. Now, just a brief refresher. So the movie begins with John as a loving husband, and of course, at the end, that's how he dies. But the whole course, the odyssey of these four films is him losing that and then regaining that. Essentially, think of it as losing his salvation, committing apostasy, and then being redeemed at the end. So the movie opens up, John 1 opens up with him receiving a dog from his late wife, and this is important to understand, the dog is not simply like, hey, to replace me, but rather it's because he needs something to love, which he does not have, and he chooses not to do throughout all the rest of the movies. And that's his major problem. And number two, because she wants him to find peace, and he refuses to find peace in the midst of the vicissitudes of life. So, of course, in the couple opening scenes, his dog ends up dying.
As long as the dog is okay, and they kill his dog. Okay, some people better die for that. Oh, don't you worry, they will. That's the whole plot of the movie.
And it's proof, it's de facto proof, the dogs are better than cats. Because if they had killed his cat, nobody would have cared. In fact, we would have thought, man, it's kind of overkill here, John, going on this long rampage. It was just a cat. Now, of course, if you're a cat person, you're probably also the kind of person who hasn't joined my Patreon yet, so probably rectify both of those pretty soon. But by going on that rampage, what he was really presented was a choice to simply accept that which he could not control. He could not have stopped that attack, but he could control how he responded. And this is the essential thing. He was never forced into anything, and he was warned against it.
Have you thought this through? I mean, chewed down to the bone. You got out once. You dipped so much as a pinky back into this pond. You may well find something reaches out and drags you back into its depths.
What Winston does not say in that clip is that there's far more consequences to his choices. It's not simply that he'll be dragged back into this life. Rather, it's that there will be an unending series of consequences for himself, to his very nature. It will be corrupting to him. He won't just be having to deal with other people, have to deal with the fact that he himself has changed. And he's going to have to deal with the fact that his actions have devastating consequences on those he loves and who love him. Just to name a handful, Marcus fights to keep him alive, and that leads to Marcus's death. The doctor, who's really the key maker from the Matrix in Parabellum, he ends up getting him killed. He gets Winston judged by the adjudicator because Winston gave him the extra hour. He gets Sharon killed and the Continental destroyed because he killed the Elder. The Ruska Roma and number 3 was slaughtered for helping him. The Continental in Osaka is slaughtered, as well as his best friend there, or one of his dear friends. He gets the Bowery King cut up after having a ton of his men diced up as well. But beyond simply the impact to his friends and those who help him, it also corrupts him. Remember, it starts with him being a loving husband, and the next 3 movies see him degrading. He moves further and further and further and further and further away from his wife. by becoming the man that he stopped being for her, right? So she was this elevating effect on this elevating person in his life. She got him out of the world, out of the world of debauchery and murder and whatever else. He left all of that behind. He died and he was redeemed, right? The Baba Yaga was destroyed, and John, the John, John Wick, her John, was reborn. And essentially what he does is he ends up committing apostasy by dabbling in and then getting pulled all the way in and then choosing to never simply yield or repent of these consequences. So how do we see that progression? Well, we see first off that not only does he go back to this life of crime, right? So he smashes the floor, destroys this sort of permanent aspect of the foundation of his house, symbolic of the fact that he's crumbling the foundation of the life that he built with his wife. He breaks it open in order to go pursue his wrath. And because of that draws out Santino, who then uses the marker. And now he's given another choice. Should I, again, re-dig this stuff back up and become the man that I was before my wife? Or should I simply choose martyrdom? Should I let Santino kill me so that I won't defile the memory of my wife? But he chooses the wrong course of action. He goes off and he kills Santino's sister. In the process, his house is destroyed, which is the symbolic of the life they built together. His phone is destroyed, which has the single memory we've seen of him and his wife. And then moving all into the third movie, he has to cut off his ring and his ring finger, symbolizing his fealty to the high table, severing ultimately his connection with his wife. So this simple choice to reject peace and pursue vice led to him becoming twice the son of hell that he was before he even met Helen. Then along comes John Wick 4, and this is where his life is set up immediately from the opening couple scenes. It's going to be either him or Cain's daughter. Those are the two options. And so we're hoping the whole time that John will see this and he will relent. He will choose the life of innocence over his own life. Or do the impossible and change the whole nature of reality, destroy the high table and everybody else in order to save the innocent and himself. I'm thankful they didn't go that route from the philosophical end of it. I mean, obviously from a plot standpoint, the whole point was supposed to be him going against the table, and they never really showed that. But if he had actually accomplished that, killing off the 12 and all the subsidiaries and whatever else, then it would have had... I feel like it would have been cheaper. This idea that no, you really can fight the wind. You really can stop the ocean.
How can you fight the wind? How can you smash the mountains? How can you bury the ocean? How can you escape from the light? Of course, you can go to the dark, but they're in the dark too.
And rather, I think a much better message is the one that we got, which was that he learned to yield to the circumstances that he couldn't control. And instead, he accepted the consequences of pursuing the good. Virtue can be quite unsafe. Now, hence the name of my channel. Doing the good thing can have very dire consequences to you personally. But ultimately, both for you and for everyone, virtue always triumphs over vice. And it can lead to even the most inevitable miseries like death becoming a good thing. There's this concept of the good death. We're going to discuss that here in a minute. But I want to wrap up. What was it that actually pulled John out of it all? Well, it was reflecting on his death, right? He's on the boat. He's trying to get to the church. And all up until this moment, his intention is to kill Cain, regardless of the fact that it's going to lead to the death of an innocent girl. But whenever he thinks about his headstone, for the first time in the whole movie, he actually mentions his wife. He had essentially forgotten about her, right? He went back for his ring, but otherwise, the entire movie, unlike the first three, she's not even mentioned. She's mentioned in the thought process of her decreases consistently until this moment when he realizes, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be remembered as? Who do I wish I had been? And on his headstone, he says, I wish to be remembered as a loving husband. And it is only at that moment that all the violence goes towards the good as opposed to the selfish. So let's pull out three major themes, things to reflect on. Memento Mori, redemption, fallen nature. It is on reflecting on his death, his inevitable death. All of us die. There is no escape. Life is a terminal disease. So how do we then deal with that fact? We remember it. We remember it consistently. Not just our own death, but we remember the death of those that we love. Everybody, every living organism is given to the second law of thermodynamics. We are going to end. And so because of that, we want to live in light of that. At the very end of the duel, John says to Cain, those who cling to death live. And I think Cain replies, those who cling to life die. which is almost identical to Christ's teaching as they're in front of the church. Christ who says, those who seek to save their lives will lose it, but those who lose their life for my sake will have it forever. And then he connects us immediately to, therefore, lay down your life, pick up your cross, and follow after Christ. Christ is the Logos incarnate, the divine reason of the world. He is the one, the lawgiver who tells us what to do. He is the Lord. And by pursuing him, we're actually able to live this good life, which will then lead to the good death. Another line by Cain, that a good death only follows from a good life. And of course, for John, reflecting on his wife, he chooses to do the right thing. He feigns dying or feigns losing in the duel so that he can draw the Marquis closer. The Marquis grants freedom to Cain and to Winston. And then, he shoots the Marquis, winning freedom for both of them with his very death. Which leads us to this idea of redemption. Now, Hollywood's view of redemption is very much second chances. Marquis asks Winston, he says, do you believe in rules and consequences? Winston replies, yes, and second chances. And the Marquis says that the second chances are the refuge of men who fail. But the problem is that all of us fail, right? Every single person has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us choose our vices, the things that the passions and the pleasures that we love over what is good. And this does have a degrading effect on us, and this does have a negative consequence on those around us. And we have to recognize that. And therefore, there has to be some way of fixing it. But what's essential to understand, and what Hollywood never reflects, is that redemption cannot be accomplished with a second chance. No matter how many tries we have, we're going to fail. Every single day, no matter how good our intentions are, we find ourselves committing some sort of sin, failing our highest ideals. So then how do we deal with it? By living better in the future. It doesn't change the past. The past is fixed. So we have to have a way of fixing the past. And that's only through the cross of Christ. He allows us to repent of our past sin, be washed of it, so that we don't have regrets. But if you're honest and you don't have a way of removing the old guilt, then you should feel regret. We should regret wasting time, wasting loved ones, wasting our lives on what is debased and degrading and will harm us and those around us. But of course, if you look at yourself soberly and you recognize those things, but you don't have Christ, then you're left with nothing but worldly sorrow, unending guilt, because there's no way to change those things about the past. So in the end, John Wick has this redemption arc where, again, not biblical, it's a heretical redemption, but for the sake of the story, let's follow it. Loving husband, debased, evil, wicked, uncaring, selfish, leading to death of everyone he loves and touches. Everyone he's near dies. And then at the very end, he remembers his death, he remembers his wife, and then he chooses virtuous action. He lives a good life for a few moments and then dies. And then he dies again, a loving husband, reflecting on his wife and honoring her memory. That needs to lead us to this idea of the fallen nature. Why is it that John took 4 movies in, a year, weeks, whatever it is, to get here? Because he is drawn, both the Marquis and the Elder talk about how it is his nature to kill. Marquis says that this not only is your nature, this is where you find your purpose. And this should be a warning for us against this idea of having a subjective purpose. If there isn't a God above all, from whom's nature, grammar people, comment down below. Tell me how to phrase that. Flowing out of his nature comes the moral order to which we are obligated. Now, if that doesn't exist, then there is no objective purpose for us. There's no way that we're supposed to be or that we are obligated to be. And what that means is that the only hope we have left is to give ourselves some sort of subjective or person-based, individual-based, relative-based purpose. I'll give myself my own purpose. But then why would it be wrong of John to make killing his purpose? Why would that not be okay? In fact, and that's to ignore the fact that it's incoherent. A purpose comes from the cause of a thing, right? The cause of the computer gave it its reason. The cause of the desk, the person who made this made it to be a desk, and therefore I didn't cause myself. Therefore, I can't really give myself a purpose. But that simple incoherence aside, it also leads to this radical subjectivism. What is wrong with John making killing his purpose? Well, we all know from each of the movies, we're all hoping, especially here at the end when it's between him and an innocent girl, we're hoping he makes the right choice. That intuition of yours implies there is something beyond us. There is a sense in which things should be, and that tells us that we should recognize that moral order, and we should subordinate ourselves to it. There is a table above all of us. There's an elder above that table, the Ancient of Days, and it is to him that we're supposed to bow our knee and pledge, I will serve, I will be of service. And it's only after we do that, after we give our lives, after we lay down our lives, we receive redemption, we receive the forgiveness of our sins, and we pick up our cross and we carry it daily, they were able to actually face death tranquilly, peacefully, and greet it honestly at the end of our lives as an old friend, ushering us into a much deeper peace than we could ever have here. That's it for now. My name is Ryan Martin. This is Unsafe Media, reminding you to like, share, subscribe, Patreon, do all those sorts of things. And until next time, trust God and keep your powder dry.